Hello, welcome everyone. Just getting set up here as people get logged in. All right, hello, welcome. People are getting logged in and we are streaming live on YouTube. Just going to quickly get set up here for our presentation. My name is Meredith Burks. I'm the Communications Director here at Seed Savers. And I'm going to do a couple of quick housekeeping things before we dive into today's event. As you're logging in, we'd love to have you type in where you're joining us from. We have people monitoring the Zoom and YouTube channel. If you're in Zoom, please remember to change your chat from all panelists to everyone so everyone can see. We are going to be together for 1 hour today. So it is going to be a quick event. And because of that, we are not going to be taking questions from the audience at the end. We do have some prepared questions for our panelists, but we would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and ideas throughout the presentation by entering it into the chat. We are also recording today's session, so if you need to leave or are watching the recording, thank you for coming back to us. This is going to be available on the Seed Savers Exchange Heritage Farm YouTube channel. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Preservation, Phil Kauth, to introduce our moderator and host. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Meredith. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is Philip Kauth, Director of Preservation at Seed Savers Exchange. This is our 4th webinar about the Seed Rematriation Partnership. So thank you all for joining. In 2017, our chair of the board of directors at Seed Savers Exchange, Rowan White, approached us to formalize a partnership with Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, which Rowan found, which is now part of Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance nonprofit. So 2017, we were invited to be a partner in the process of seed rematriation. In the first couple of years, we grew on the farm here with guidance from Rowan about what to rematriate. And then last year, 2020, we received a grant from North Central SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. And Jessika Greendeer from Dream of Wild Health and Shelley Buffalo, who was with Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Initiative, and Rebecca Webster with the Oneida Nation were the 3 partners on that grant. And it was just a wonderful partnership. And this past year, Jessika invited some more friends and colleagues to participate in another round of the SARE partnership grant. So the idea is that the seeds, indigenous varieties that are at Seed Savers Exchange, the partners would select and grow to rematriate back to their communities and nations and tribes and friends and family. So it's been really rewarding. Looking forward to this webinar. And with that, I am going to introduce Shelley Buffalo, our good friend and colleague. Shelley is an enrolled member of the Meskwaki tribe and lives on the Meskwaki settlement with her 2 sons. The Meskwaki are unique in that their land-based community is a settlement, not a reservation. Established in 1857 with the purchase of 80 acres near Tama, Iowa, the Meskwaki settlement has grown to approximately 8,400 acres. Shelley joined Seed Savers Exchange for the 2021 growing season as a seasonal seed steward. She now works for Sustainable Iowa Land Trust, SILT, through the AmeriCorps Vista program. Her service assignment with SILT is to build capacity in farmer outreach in order to increase land access for socially disadvantaged farmers. Shelley served her community recently in coordinator roles at Red Earth Gardens and with Meskwaki Food Sovereignty Initiative. She continues to advocate for food sovereignty and local foods through her personal consultancy, networks, and partnerships. She's an advocate for land back, indigenous foodways, food justice, and rematriation. So kicking it over to you, Shelley.
Thank you for the introduction, Phil. And I just want to say that I'm really excited to welcome Jessika and Phoebe to this webinar number 4. I think everybody's really going to enjoy everything that they have to share today and appreciate it too. Jessika Greendeer, Farm Director of Dream of Wild Health, is a Ho-Chunk Nation tribal member from Baraboo, Wisconsin, and a member of the Deer Clan. She has worked as the Agricultural Division Manager for her nation and also served as a garden mentor within its organic community gardens. A U.S. Army combat veteran, she completed a veteran to farmer training program at the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania. Phoebe Young, Youth Program Assistant for Dream of Wild Health, is a Saginaw Chippewa descendant from Michigan, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and currently residing in Minneapolis. From 2018 to 2020, she worked as a community programs coordinator for Dream of Wild Health. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in the American Studies Critical Indigenous Studies cohort at the University of Minnesota. Her doctorate work focuses on natural resource extraction on Ojibwe lands in the Great Lakes region during the 20th century, and how tribal food sovereignty has countered this extraction by keeping culture and tradition alive. She is also interested in how Indigenous food sovereignty can shape land-based education curricula for Indigenous youth.
I see a couple of messages that sound is not being shared, so I'm just going to take a quick second and try to fix that. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Oops, Meredith, while you're working on that, would it be all right if I asked a couple of questions?
That would be great. Thank you, Shelley.
Okay. Phoebe and Jessika, would you start your video and turn off your mute? So while we're working on the sound issue with this video, and by the way, we really want you to see this video, so have some patience with us here. So let's just start out with a question about rematriation. Jessika and Phoebe, what does rematriation mean to you? And I know it's a broad question.
Right. Thank you for that question, Shelley. Rematriation means so much to me. It's not just about the energy coming, the feminine energy coming behind to sort of pick up those pieces of our culture, whether that's part of our foods, the stories that go into different ceremonies, or maybe it's different objects that we have cultural significance to. Rematriation to me is like the culmination of all of those coming back together as we continue to strengthen our cultures, you know, not only within my tribe, but also with other tribes across Turtle Island or North America. And I think it's a beautiful revitalization of being able to make those connections again and re-strengthen our culture. And, you know, with our work, it's primarily with our food. So our ancestral foods that we were connected with, and now are able to reconnect.
I think for me, when I think about rematriation, in addition to what Jessika has put forward as the kind of the definition, I think a lot about our young people. In our work at Dream of Wild Health, we have this huge blessing of getting to work with our youth and having that be a core part of our mission and our work. And so I think a lot about rematriation as a kind of returning to or reawakening of a lot of the ways of being and knowing and moving through our worlds that we had originally that have been sleeping for many generations or kind of in hiding or protected in one way, shape, or form. And thinking about how our youth are connected to that as a kind of like a future-oriented coming back to what we know to be tradition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, real quick, Meredith, do you want to stop screen sharing? And then that way the speaker view comes back up so we can see Jessika and Phoebe as they answer the questions or respond. Would that be okay?
I think I did get the audio figured out, if you don't mind, if we want to try.
Yeah, let's go ahead and see if that'll play.
What does Dream of Wild Health mean to you?
That it's a really special place to be at. You can feel honored and safe here.
I'm part of something like important.
It is a safe haven for me.
I feel like I was like being good. I was always being good.
A farm is, our safe and sacred place. This is kind of the heart of the organization.
Dream of Wild Health is a place where all of this, all of the work around food sovereignty comes together. All of our youth or our future generations are able to get exposure to not only in the gardens with our cultivated relatives, but also in the natural world of the woods, the tree lines, the nature preserves, and get experience and exposure to our wild relatives. But then the beautiful part about all of that coming together is they also get to spend time in the kitchen with our Indigenous chefs, our nutritionists, and really get to learn more about how everything comes together. And that's what I think that's what I love most about Dream of Wild Health. It creates that full circle effect.
I'm Bear Clan from the Red Lake Nation of Ojibwe, or Anishinaabe, and I've been at Dream of Wild Health going on 5 years. Just being here with all of our teachers and just taking in all the knowledge that I can. It feels really good to be here with all the youth and all of the different energies that they bring.
This is probably my 4th+ year. I started actually as a youth leader before I even did garden programs, if I remember right. For 2 summers, and I did some youth leader programs, and then I came back as staff in the summer of 2020. I know when I was a youth actually going through program, I loved it a lot. I loved hanging out with adults who shared my Native identity, and I always felt comfortable with that.
Finding Indigenous connection within our plant relatives, within the youth that are here, and having those connections with like knowing that they're not alone and that it's okay to feel these things and to ask for help and to share story, and there's healing in that.
If you're having a hard time, it's like a spot where you could just come and just forget about like things that are happening and just relax with everyone else.
It's a really good place, to be able to express yourselves in more than one way, learn about many different things,
When you partake of the food that is out here, like I know I feel whole and my kids feel whole. Like it's like our relatives that are nourishing us from beyond, and like these are things that heal our spirit, heal our body, heal our mind.
So when we get to walk on that and you see the young people feel it, when they put their hands in the dirt and they can feel it, that they know that's our Mother Earth is taking care of us, and we give back.
It is a wonderful place where there's a bunch of plants growing food trees, life too. It's just lovely to see everything.
When we go forward with the intention of honoring each other and honoring each other's gifts, that's what lifts us all up.
I hope that they always know that they can keep those teachings close to continue to guide them through the rest of their life.
Jessika or Phoebe, did you want to start with your presentation?
Absolutely. I had to dry my eyes a little bit. No matter how many times I see that video, I still get teary-eyed to think about our youth. We talk about seeds. We talk about, seed rematriation, some of those seeds coming out of different institutions and being reconnected with their Indigenous communities of origin. Some of the work behind the scenes of the seed rematriation is looking at researching seeds. So it's not only information about where those seeds were maybe donated from, or the community that or the tribe that they came from, but it's also thinking of how our Indigenous communities across America have changed and moved, whether it was something pre-contact that they were moving from one space to another part, or through forced removals across the country. So I think the beautiful part about our seeds is that our seeds, like this particular variety here on the screen is the Winnebago flower corn. This flower corn, although it was given a Ho-Chunk name or a Winnebago name, there are still many other nations who were nourished by these same seeds. So whether there were, language barriers, pre-contact, we all took care of one another. And so many of the seeds that we see within different bundles are related in more ways than one. And so they may carry one name, but it was nourished by many other nations. I think that's what I love about this work. It's not just about the work in the garden, but it's about the work that we're doing behind the scenes. Next slide. And so, of course, we tried different aspects of being able to grow the seed as they came to us from Seed Savers Exchange. So did multiple attempts with these seeds. So not only incorporating the moon cycle planting, but also planting straight into the ground with some of them, and some of them directly into the flats. And so, of course, the ones that are in the flats got some extra time in the greenhouse and were kind of babied along. But, thinking about strengthening those seeds, putting them back into the soil where they once thrived, has been such a beautiful process. I think there's so many growers on these calls that understand, the gift that we get from seeing those little tiny sprouts pop through the earth's surface. And so, it's one of those things where it's like baby said its first word, and we're able to be a part of that entire life cycle within one growing season for many of our Indigenous crops. Next slide. And so this is, of course, the babies getting a little bit bigger. I refer to many of the seeds as babies because at some point they need our help. They need our help to be able to find their way back into the earth, but also when they're in a sterile or more sterile environment, we have to make sure that we're irrigating them, giving them the right amount of temperature and sunlight as they start their life cycle again. So at this point, this is baby being able to stand and maybe take a couple first steps and getting closer and closer to coming outside and being back in the natural world. Next slide. And this is one of the Winnebago varieties that actually grew straight from the ground. So again, doing small, maybe it's not putting all of our eggs into one basket. So it's keeping a small portion just to see what the plant prefers. And I enjoy doing a lot of this because it's not only keeping them separate in different ways, but it's also seeing like how much stronger some of those seeds that we put straight into the ground thrive so much more without that little head start inside the greenhouse. Next slide. So this is one of the examples of this is at my home farm. And so an example of more of an urban style of seed saving. And so you can tell by the picture, it is not very big. This is the front part of that mound. And so this is a mound system where there are just two of the sisters in this particular one, corn and squash. And so the corn is one of the varieties that came out of Seed Savers Exchange. And then one of my other ancestral varieties, the squash that I've been growing with for a few years. You do have to be very creative in urban spaces. And for those of you who are urban growers, you, I think, can totally relate to maybe understand the different challenges that we have, especially when you have a numerous amount, a large variety of seed that you're trying to grow and trying to continue to do maintenance grow outs on, that it can be a challenge. But I will say, although it's challenging, it's not impossible. Next slide. No, and this is, we've sent the babies off to college, and now they're coming home with their, spouses or maybe a bun in the oven. So, at this point, the corn has finished her pollination cycle. She's finished pollinating. This particular variety had so much pollen to give. And so we had a very dry year last year, dry growing season last year. And so that pollen just continued to fly, and there were no issues with pollination whatsoever with this variety. Next slide. And this is, of course, this is her continuing to dry down on the plant. So just to give everybody a better understanding of why there's the corn with the squash within this particular mound group, is that the squash will help prevent different different critters to getting to your corn. And so it wasn't until I moved here did I realize squirrels were actually a threat to the garden. And so had to find different unique ways of keeping different critters out of the garden, especially while our seeds were still drying down. Next slide. And this is just, this is one of the Mandan varieties that we grew at Dream of Wild Health. And I thought it was, oh my God, it was so beautiful within this variety. She was growing. And then we had some volunteer sunflowers pop up within this particular variety, but they grew so well together. So I think it was a mistake, but at the same time, thinking about it in a spiritual way, that corn and that sunflower needed to grow together to thrive. And so some of the Mandan varieties that we grew at Dream of Wild Health were very short in stature, averaging about 3.5 feet tall. And some of the taller ones were about 5 feet tall. So, a more northern Flint variety growing at a shorter day than some of the flower corns that we were also growing. Next slide. This is I love that squirrel stew. This is one of this is the cowpea that we grew out of the collection. And so this was a Potawatomi seed. And she was such an interesting cowpea to watch. I've only used cowpeas before in like a cover crop mix. So being able to intentionally plant a cowpea and watch her grow was magnificent. It seemed like it was taking her a long time to get to the flowering stage. And so I had some hesitation with that, considering the length of our growing season in Minnesota. But she all of a sudden just, all of a sudden she had blooms everywhere, and everything was getting seeding and flowering. Next slide. This is also one of the Mandan varieties coming out of the seed garden at Dream of Wild Health. Next slide. And so part of the work that we do with our seeds is not just, for the most part, we try to let them dry down as much as we possibly can in the field, but it's also finding that balance. So last year we did not have to remove corn plants from the ground, which we have had to do in the past. And we'll do that to allow the seed to finish drying down without the threat of wildlife in the garden. This year, however, because of the drought, we were able to harvest so much of the corn early on in the season, and then we braid the corn. Phoebe is an amazing braider, and don't let her tell you otherwise, but at this point, we're allowing the seeds to dry down. They're in a shade. We do have some shade cloth on our greenhouse, and just a dry place for them to hang out. Next slide. This was one of the Winnebago varieties. This is Winnebago mixed. And she was the corn that we were referring to within that mound garden of the urban, in the urban space. So she was planted with the full moon, and then harvested early, even though she's a flower variety, and made these beautiful, beautiful braids. Next slide.
So this is a photo here of some of our young people and our elder and cultural director who walked on a few years ago, Ernie Whiteman, putting up a teepee at the farm. So just as we're looking after and rematriating and welcoming a lot of our seed relatives back into our communities and continuing to grow with them, we're also doing the same for our young people. I also have to quickly qualify the corn braiding and say that I got a good teacher who was Jessika. So we at the farm have been really blessed and honored to have a lot of intergenerational learning environments where our youth are able to learn from our elders, and also, you know, our staff are able to learn from one another. So I know a lot of my, you know, journey that I've been on in terms of growing out some of our Indigenous seed relatives has been because of Jessika, and also because of our youth and our elders. Ernie had a really beautiful saying that he would always remind our young people of when they were getting, you know, reintroduced to their seed relatives. And he would say, you know, that seed is the only thing that you can hold in your hand that your ancestors have held before you. And I think about that often because I think for a lot of us who grew up in various stages of and relationships to their culture. Some of us have grown up further away. Some of us have grown up closer to our cultures. Being able to hold those seeds is a really beautiful and close relationship that we can nourish, you know, with our relatives in the past and also with our relatives in the future. And then at the end of each season, being able to nourish our communities too with the foods that we've grown or sharing those seeds is really a great gift. So we can head to that next slide there. And so here's a photo that I really love of our young people and some of the blue Hubbard squash that we grew out a couple years ago. And this was just a really beautiful day where our youth just came into the seed garden at Jessika's direction, and they just harvested like crazy. I know that our youth and our seeds at the farm are some of our greatest teachers, and there's a lot of parallels in how they both grow, right? So I know people will get hesitant about, oh, I don't know if I can, you know, grow out these seeds in a good way. I don't know if I can be in this young person's life in a good way. And I think one of the greatest lessons that I've had with, you know, both seed saving and also working with our youth is that they know what they need the best. And a lot of times it's just taking that first step of being able to be humble enough to listen to what they need, and also having enough confidence in them that they can kind of grow their own path, and also just doing it with as much love and patience in your heart as you can. And it's hard, but it's really, really rewarding and beautiful. And so I love this photo. We can go to the next slide. I think it's a similar photo. Oh yeah, it is. So this is kind of the beginning stages here. This past summer, we had some of our chorus kids youth. So we at the farm, we work with youth ages 8 to 18. And the youth in the previous photo were some of our garden warriors from session 2 a few years back. They know much more than I do about growing foods. And I really am thankful to be able to work with them and watch them grow, because I know that our future is really bright with them. And they've come along at this time for a reason, right? And so here we have our bitty ones, our chorus kids. So they're in that 8 to 12 year range. And it's really beautiful to see each of the different ages of young people working with the seeds. So here, you know, we got the crew, it was their first session at the farm. So there is some hesitancy. A lot of our youth are from the Twin Cities. So although all of our youth are Native, not everyone has been, you know, able to come out to, you know, a context beyond the city. So sometimes it's their first time doing it. They're a lot like I was, you know, when I was 10, I didn't know there were so many stars in the sky until I got out of Brooklyn, right? And so getting to be with them during these moments where they are starting to really like put 2 and 2 together and step into their own, and also learning about themselves as they're planting those seeds, is a really beautiful process. And so this is one of those days where we got to plant some squash mounds with them, and they did an amazing job of it. So we can go to that next slide there. There's another photo of them planting. We can go to the next slide after it. And so some of the part of our teachings at Dream of Wild Health is teaching them how to be good, you know, stewards of the land, and also thinking about, you know, how they can reconnect with their own cultural teachings. At Dream of Wild Health, you know, we're an intertribal organization. We are on Dakota homelands, and we also are largely Dakota and Ojibwe and Ho-Chunk led. So a lot of our leaders are coming from the Midwest, but a lot of our youth come from all over. So, just as Jessika was saying about our seed relatives nourishing a lot of different tribes, and growing with a lot of different tribes. I think that's one of the really beautiful parallels and mirrors of the work that we do at Dream of Wild Health is our youth come from all over, and we try our best to give them that cultural grounding and those teachings around how to grow their food, while also thinking about asking their own communities more about what their traditions are and how to relate to one another in a good way while staying rooted in who they are and where they come from. We can go to that next slide there. And part of that also includes understanding that, the full cycle of food sovereignty, and knowing that it's growing your food, and it's knowing your language, and it's knowing your traditional teachings, and it's also being able to prepare your food once it comes out of the garden. So we've got a 30-acre farm up in Hugo, just about 38 minutes outside of the cities. And part of what we do every day is we have our youth come into the kitchen, which is just kind of in that house that you can see in the background there. And they help out making food for all of their relatives at the farm. And it's really, really beautiful to see them put two and two together and understanding the process of growing their foods, of lovingly asking their foods and those seeds to nourish them, and then being able to prepare them into something beautiful that their whole community can share in, is always just a beautiful gift to get to see. We can go to that next slide there too. And part of the work that we do, actually a quick disclaimer here, we have a few photos where our youth don't have masks on. So currently at the farm, we do take those COVID protocols really seriously, but a few of these are from the before times. So you might see some youth without masks. But part of what we are also teaching them is how to prepare our foods traditionally. So this is a butagan that we got from Dan Cornelius over at the Intertribal Ag Council. And here's our youth getting a chance to prepare some corn flour traditionally. And in the background, you can see some of our flour corn varieties as well. We can go to that next slide there. And then, part of our seed saving is looking after and growing with our seed relatives who, have agreed to grow with us in a farm and an agricultural environment. And then part of it for us as, Indigenous peoples in the Midwest also includes a lot of traditional foraging, so things like wild ricing as well too. Yeah, so I know in Ojibwe, Minumin, that's the good seed, right? So we also see and understand a lot of our wild plant relatives as seeds that we're looking after and nourishing as well. And so here we've got one of our youth from one of our programs getting a chance to winnow some of our wild rice too. And we can go to the next slide there. And getting to parch it as well. We can hop over to the next slide. And as we're kind of going along this seed saving, teachings with our young people, we're also teaching them broadly about what it means to be food sovereign. So some of that means, knowing how to hunt in a good way, knowing how to fillet a fish. I know that's also my own learning journey. I this particular day, I really did not fillet a fish real good, and I'm better at eating those fish. But it's always teaching our youth all of the different components of food sovereignty. And I think in a lot of our Indigenous cultures, it's not just one specific thing. Everything is relational. So a lot of our teachings are related to one another. So being able to plant a seed is also being able to know your language, being able to, preserve food, being able to cook, being able to think ahead. It's all a very interconnected process. We can go to that next slide there. And so some of that too is encouraging our youth, much as we encourage our seeds and hope that our seeds kind of bring their own gifts into the growing season. It's also helping our youth during their stages of growth to understand what their gifts are as well, especially in this really broad landscape of food sovereignty. So some of that looks like, encouraging our youth to learn from some of our really amazing staff. This particular amazing staff member is Jessika here, encouraging them to learn from their staff members and their elders and people in their community about some of these traditions that they have, and figuring out which ones that they might want to take up for the next generations as well. So here's when we were able to come over to Jessika's house to work on some deer hides, and we can hop to that next slide too. And part of that work also includes, encouraging and supporting our youth and their families and, the greater community in the Twin Cities to grow their own foods in their own gardens, right? And I think that was a really big lesson from COVID that we got was the need for Indigenous food sovereignty, and the need for food sovereignty in communities globally is a lot closer than we think. And being able to grow your own food and to have a good relationship with the land is so crucial. And when when COVID hit, we started seeing a lot more people requesting seeds and requesting guidance on how to grow their own food. And a lot of our young people took that work up. But some of our work as adults in their lives is being able to know that work as well, and also being able to learn that work. We don't have to be experts. We don't even have to be ahead of them. They might know more than us. That's okay. But we do have to be, with them in that growing journey. So for me, that looked like, in the spring of 2020, I started planting some of the seeds that had come into my own bundle, some of which were through the Seed Savers Exchange that were gifted to me through a few different people. Here, there's a corn variety that is so beautiful, is a flower corn variety that Zach Page had gifted to me, and we're still figuring out her name, but that's also part of it too, is just being willing to listen and being humble in kind of understanding the growing process. So for me, I am farming or gardening in a very urban setting. That my first year was just in my backyard, which was kind of more of an alleyway. And I just tried my best and had a lot of humbling experiences and tried to learn from it. And this past year was in my mom's home over in the Longfellow area of South Minneapolis. So I seen a few folks in the chat who are coming in from the Twin Cities. So hey there, I know you guys can also speak to that urban growing experience too. And you can also see there's some of the Ojibwe women's beans who have grown really, really beautifully with that corn variety, and some Seminole squash in the back as well. So that was my garden this year. And we can talk a little bit more about it in the questions as well, but I'm happy to talk a little bit about what I know from my experience doing some urban seed saving and some urban Indigenous food sovereignty attempts. So I think we got one more slide there, Meredith. And then, and so then this is just a quick photo that I wanted to include just to kind of wrap things up here with our presentation. This is our youth making that video that you saw. They, much like I said, much like our seeds and the seeds that we get to grow with, they're the ones who know what they need the best. And one of the things that was really beautiful about this video was it was an opportunity that we got this past summer through the University of Minnesota to do a little promotional video so that people could get a sense of what Dream of Wild Health means to us, but specifically doing it through the lens of our young people. And what was so beautiful in this process is you got a chance for each of the youth to kind of think about what their gifts are in telling a story. So here we got one of our youth who's doing that interview process. The other one who's in the blue shirt there really was taken to directing and was letting everyone know where to go. And then the one kind of just in the background, she did a wonderful job of interviewing and keeping track of the questions that she wanted to ask. So I think, I would say as people are growing with all of these different seed varieties and are growing out their foods, that they also are open to this experience of thinking about how they're growing with those seeds and those foods, and how they can encourage, those next generations to do the same. And it's just a really beautiful process to see that kind of symmetry between our young people and our seeds. And they're also, the seed garden is just in the background there. So Miigwech, I'll let us go into that Q&A there.
Well, thank you for the video and the presentation. I think we covered a lot of the questions in that part of the chat. But one of the things that I would like to cover really is going back to the teaching from Eddie, that those seeds that you hold in your hand connect you, right, to the seeds that your ancestors held. And that ties into why rematriation is so important to healing and resilience. And do you have any more in-depth reflections on that and what it means to you? And
yeah, we, the world lost a very amazing and gifted teacher and leader when Ernie made his journey to the next world. But I feel like he still very much continues to guide the work here at the organization. And if he, it's that feeling like, I wonder what Ernie would say about this. And, as you're sitting and reflecting, but he had so many teachings, and I'm grateful for the intergenerational environment that we have here within the organization. Because of that, there's things that our elders can tell us and share with us that we haven't yet experienced. But there's also, it's not just a top-down type of learning, it's also a bottom-up. There are so many things that I too have learned and gleaned from our young people. And, thinking about the circle of life, they too are also closer to the creator than we are. And, they come with those, with open minds and wanting to be a part of it. And so I love working at Dream of Wild Health. It is my dream job. But I will say that the youth are really what make this job not a job anymore. It's recreating that village that we all once had, and making sure that, the load of doing any aspect of the food sovereignty work is not on the shoulders of one person. We can see the next generation coming behind us, that you're like, you know what, they're going to be a chef, or they're going to be a ricer, or they're going to be a seed keeper. Like, you can see those characteristics in all of them. And so I think, Ernie had a great way of also showing that. Like, Ernie had been on this earth for a very long time, but there were things that he was also taken back by from the youth, that there was something that they would say, or that a perspective they would offer, that it was something that he hadn't even considered.
And I know for me, seed rematriation really was that realization of the seeds that I was holding in my hands, and that I was planting and taking care of, and harvesting everything, and then eventually eating. That was connecting me, to my grandmothers, and going back thousands of years. In that, my dad is a boarding school survivor. So the Indian boarding schools were an intentional cultural genocide, right? And so that what that creates is intergenerational trauma. And I was just so grateful for those seeds to help me to access my own language and culture, right? And overcome the barriers of generational trauma. which was preventing that access, even for, you know, our Meskwaki ways. That was right before my face. So it's incredibly powerful. And I want to loop that back into this seed rematriation. These seeds are our relatives, like our Meskwaki seeds. You know, our last webinar, Luke talked about it. These are our relatives. And I know that, like, we've got a lot of we have a lot of seed stewards, you know, joining us in this talk. And I know people are also really eager to grow foods, but perhaps, like, rather than wanting to access, you know, these, some of them newly rematriated back into their communities, right? Which is kind of making the family whole. But rather than feeling kind of that need to really want to get their hands on some seeds, to kind of reflect on some other ways that they can be in solidarity with rematriation efforts.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shelley. And I know, you know, we talk a lot about intergenerational traumas and that generational healing. The seeds that we steward, or the seeds that are coming home, are going through that same healing process with us. You know, those seeds were stripped from the hands of our ancestors and put into places that there were different languages spoken around them than before. You know, English was now spoken to them instead of their traditional languages. And I know for me personally, that's very healing for me, is being able to speak my language back to the seeds as they're growing, and feeling that magic come over you. That it always makes me cry. And I'm not a crier, but that's one of the things that will make me cry, is knowing that as much as we've been longing for them, they've been longing for us too. And I think with rematriation, you know, it's not just about Indigenous seeds, it's about all seeds. All seeds deserve to have somebody that wants to be in relationship with them. And so I think it's very important for people to identify, you know, their own ancestral background, so that way they can also find the seeds that nourish their ancestors. And maybe that's, you know, a rutabaga, or it's carrots. And I'm using those as examples because some of those crops have been so heavily commercialized that the identity and that spirit of that seed is no longer seen by the mainstream markets. And so I think it's very important for people to connect with those seeds and try to have a relationship with them, so they can also give a voice to, like, what we need to do and what we need to do as a human species moving forward. You know, I love corn, but I also know that being almost as a mother to them, that I can't have a favorite. You know, I have to love all of the children equally. So, you know, it's making sure that we also know that within ourselves, we have the amount of space in our homes, and the space in our hearts to be able to continue to carry on those seeds, and move forward with those seeds. And it's, you know, not just about the ability to grow them, but it's the ability to have a relationship with them and learn about their stories and learn about all of their little quirks in the field, and what they like, or do they like to be sung to? You know, thinking about all of those different things, like, we have to be able to maintain that entire bundle of information along with the seed to be able to make sure that they continue to have that, that they can exist long after we've all moved on to the next world.
Thank you, Jessika. Phoebe, during your presentation, one of the things that I really appreciated you saying repeatedly was in a good way. In a good way. And that's how, you know, that's one thing that binds us together, like us different tribes, right? Is that we always send out our prayers and our thoughts, our actions, we always work on making sure we send them out in a good way. So thank you so much, Phoebe, and for bringing that, to your work with the youth. It's so important. And I want to tell you that urban gardens and urban seed saving is rematriation. And would you just share a little bit more about how that's making a difference for those urban spaces, and being mindful that not everybody has access to land?
Definitely, Shelley, miigwech for bringing that up. I think so. I feel I'm a city kid. I'll say that first and foremost, and so I think a lot about how we need to treat our cities and understand our cities as sacred spaces as well, right? Not only, being that they're located on traditional homelands of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, but also thinking about a lot of times when we think about what is sacred land, we tend to have this concept of it's land that hasn't been touched. And I think that we really need to also think of our urban environments as sacred spaces as well. In Minneapolis, we are on, sacred sites of Dakota peoples every day, and it needs to be, recognized and treated as such. And I think a lot of us non-Dakota folks also need to do that work of thinking about how we move through that space too. And that's something that I try to think about as well. And part of the way that I approach that is understanding and kind of trying to cultivate a relationship with this land and space as best as I can. And so for me, that is that's growing out food and growing out what food I can. And it's definitely challenging because there has been a lot of ways that our land has not been treated well, and the lands that we are living on have not been treated well in city spaces. So for instance, I live over in the Phillips neighborhood, which is historically a spot where there's been a lot of arsenic, a lot of soil pollution from a lot of the factories that have been there. And it's a really big ask of our seed relatives to grow in those spaces. And a lot of times I know within myself, and also even just, I was having this conversation just last night with one of my good friends, Tyra, who also was one of our coworkers at Dream of Wild Health, where they were saying like, well, I'm nervous to grow out all of, some of these indigenous seed varieties that I'm watching over, because I don't want to mess it up. And I was like, I understand, but also, you gotta just do it in a good way, right? Like just be as humble as you can about it, be open to making those mistakes, and also just kind of asking the seeds if they'll grow with you, and just giving them love. And so for me, I think it is really healing to be able to grow with those seeds in the city, and also to see how many other folks who are within our Native community here in the city, how fearless they are around that too, and how much work has been put into growing out our seed relatives in all sorts of different places. And the same way that we're resilient, we also need to give our seeds credit for their resiliency too, right? And understanding that they just want to grow the same way that we just want to grow, and they deserve to be in those spaces where they can give their gifts. And so even if the space isn't perfect, right? It's okay to just still just do your best and give those seeds as much love as you can. So I don't have a ton of seasons of growing our seed relatives out under my belt. So I don't speak from a ton of experience or nothing, but this is just kind of what's been shared with me. And I know Jessica's been huge in encouraging me to do this too, because I was scared out of my mind to do this. But it's also like, Jessica says this, I know Hope Flanagan, our cultural teacher and elder at Dream of Wild Health, also says this. It's like it's work that once you start it, you can't really put it down, right? And that's a very scary thing, but also a beautiful thing too, because it makes me think about how many seasons of growing we get to do in, you know, in a place like Minneapolis, and how many seasons we'll get to grow out with some of our seed relatives. And that makes me really excited. You know, even during the George Floyd uprisings, which were really, really tough and traumatic time, being able to come out to the garden space that I had and just kind of visit with those seed relatives and like let them know what was going on was a really big gift. And it was just a very healing experience too. And being able to share food with people at the end of the season, it was this, it was a reminder that, you know, not everything was okay, but that we were going to keep going and we were going to be okay. Right. And it was healing. And for me, at least, it helps me imagine a future when it's really hard to a lot of times, even if that future is just one growing season away. I think that can make all the difference in a lot of people's mental health and spiritual health, and also in, you know, their physical health too, right?
Thank you, Phoebe. So many things you said that, oh man, I connect to so strongly. For one thing, you know, just being scared to death to take up, you know, this work. But one thing is that they, you know, becoming a seed keeper, I feel is teaching me how to be a good ancestor, right? It's teaching me how to be an elder. And I think that, you know, I had real fear that like I just wouldn't know how to, and it's an important responsibility. So these seeds are incredible teachers. So we're at the hour. I wish we could talk to both of you for another hour, honestly. I hate to let you go. So I'm going to have to come up to Dream of Wild Health soon and see everybody in person. And I encourage all of our audience out there, please rewatch the video, you know, about Dream of Wild Health. And the link is in Meredith. The link is, where is that for that video? It's on YouTube. And I want to say, as you know, in parting, watch the video, listen to the drum, right? The drum is all of our heartbeats. It connects us all together, and it connects us to Earth, the Earth, Mother Earth, right? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. Thank you, Jessika. Thank you, Shelley. I know this was the last of our 4-part series, but I feel like we need more at some point. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. Best wishes to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just going to mention I did drop that direct link to the Dream of Wild Health YouTube in the chat. We'll send it out and put it on the YouTube where this recording is going to live. You can also find the other recordings available again on the Seed Savers Exchange Heritage Forum YouTube channel. Thank you, Shelley, our host, and our panelists, Phoebe and Jessika. Thank you, everyone, for spending time with us. And thank you to SARE for your support. Have a wonderful day, everyone.